Hello everyone, welcome back to Unraveling Politics, a weekly political analysis show. Thank you for joining me as always. So last week with the tax cuts behind us, the tariffs were the big issue of the week. If you remember, 3 months ago, I said that reciprocal tariffs would kick off on July the 9th. Well, it's July 14th, and there has been no reciprocal tariffs. That is because they were extended to August 1st. According to the president, there will be no further extensions, which threatened to sink the markets yet again, as they did 3 months ago. This state of back and forth, as I said 3 months ago, leads us basically back to where we were in the middle of April. Trump has also gained a new moniker, Trump always chickens out, which is because he makes a threat, then reverses it, extends the deadline, or reverses it again. The threat of not extending it again, I assume, is to try to get motivation in negotiators to try to get them to implement new trade deals within the next 3 weeks. Speaking of trade deals, there's been 2 so far. I've talked about the one with the UK, and I don't think I talked about the one with Vietnam, but neither of them were very big. And China's remains murky. We were supposed to have 90 deals in 90 days, which now Trump is saying that you can't talk to everyone all at once, which is once again reveals the lack of strategy in this administration, or at least the lack of focus, or maybe both if you're cynical like I am. He also threatened Brazil with 50% tariffs for attacks on U.S. companies and conducting a witch hunt against former President Bolsonaro in the 2022 election, who tried to overturn the 2022 election like Trump did in 2020. Bolsonaro was considered the Trump of the tropics. I'm thinking that the tech company's part is just a cover-up for political motivations behind this. The president of Brazil, Lula da Silva, has said he would implement reciprocal tariffs, and I don't know exactly what we get from Brazil. I think a lot of oil, maybe oil and agricultural products like sugar cane and coffee, but I'm not entirely sure. That's just what sounds right. Trump also said that he would tariff BRIC countries. BRIC is supposed to be the Brazil, Russia, India, and China country, and South Africa, the BRICS countries, when he wrote, any country aligning themselves with the anti-American policies of BRICS will be charged with an additional 10% tariff. There will be no exceptions to this policy, Trump said on Truth Social Sunday last week, so not yesterday, but last week. And nobody really knows what anti-American policies are. It's assumed that this is supposed to mean creating a new currency to challenge the dollar, but these countries are already paying a 10% tariff because that's what President Trump implemented. He implemented a 10% tariff, and so now the president is talking about raising it to 15 to 20%. Additionally, Canada is in talks with the U.S. over a new trade deal, and they've been threatened, I believe, with 30% tariffs. And at the same time, Trump has ordered the EU and Mexico to speed up negotiations by August 1st, or 30% tariffs will be implemented, and that's more than on April 2nd, which was called Liberation Day. That was supposed to be 20% tariffs on the EU, then it was lowered to 10%. It was threatened to be raised to 50%, and now he's threatening 30%. The president of the European Commission, her name is Ursula von der Leyen, has said they will work to the August 1st deadline, but they've also said that they would implement reciprocal tariffs if that's exactly what Trump does, which makes sense to me. That's what I would do if I was them. Meanwhile, Trump has acknowledged that Mexico has begun to work with the president, with himself and the administration on fentanyl, but said that that wasn't enough and they need to stop the flow completely, otherwise higher tariffs will remain. And I mean, I would agree, yes, that it should be Mexico's job for controlling the flood of fentanyl that comes out of the border, but we also can't rely entirely on Mexico, and that we should also be prepared to, as President Trump supports, building the wall and monitoring the border 24/7 on every square inch of it. And these goods that, if they're tariffed, would not apply to the USMCA exempt goods. I'm not exactly sure what those are. You could look those up if you're interested. And the USMCA, it stands for the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, and that was negotiated by President Trump in his first term. I also want to add, I was reading that there is one benefit to these tariffs, and that is the revenue that is coming into the Treasury. According to Scott Bessent, who is the Treasury Secretary, the Treasury has raised $100 billion from tariff revenue alone, with $300 billion expected this year, which would almost completely plug in the hole, the fiscal black hole that President Trump's massive tax and spending bill what cost, which is about $330 billion over 10 years. Or $330 billion a year, $3.3 billion for 10 years. In fact, this is the first time in 8 years that the U.S. Treasury has reported a surplus for any single month that wasn't a month that taxes were due. So, for example, we recorded, I believe, a $250 billion surplus in the month of April. That's because that's when our income taxes are due. So, obviously, that's going to be distorted. This is the first time in 8 years that we have seen the Treasury report a surplus. And this is it took in the U.S. government was in the red or in the black $227 billion more than it spent, and this comes after a whopping $316 billion deficit in the month of May. Will July remain the same? I doubt it, but this is a good sign. This is the first surplus that we've had in the month of June since 2005, so 20 years ago. So this is not a fluke. The tariffs are definitely impacting revenue. Now, will it impact inflation? And that's the thing. Well, this is great, but remember who has to pay for these higher taxes? U.S. companies and ultimately the U.S. taxpayer. And I think that some tax rises and tariffs will be. I think they should have let taxes rise, and they should have raised some tariffs instead of to try to plug in the $2 trillion deficit instead of cutting taxes. What I'm concerned about is inflation, and Wells Fargo, it predicted inflation to be 2.9% for this year, which is relatively low for recent years, but it is above the target. And tariffs are expected to keep inflation higher and interest rates up, which means that government debt will remain expensive. And we've already seen categories like clothing, furniture, and toys rise higher than expected. We don't know the full picture yet because so much was bought in the aftermath of the election, and it takes months for the affected stock to reach shelves. And I would expect more price increases coming down the pike. And if there are price increases, that means that Americans are going to buy less, which would be less sales tax revenue for the states, and that would also which would cause a lot of problems for the states, and that would also mean less imports, and if there's less imports, that means less revenue. And if there's a recession and people get laid off, that means there's going to be fewer income taxes going to the federal government, so it could actually end up balancing out. Before we move on, I do want to mention the media's role in this, and frankly, I am very disappointed. Our so-called liberal media has not been doing a very good job at explaining to the American people these tariffs. There was a headline in CNN, for example, that read, "Trump threatens a 35% tariff on Canadian goods, and he may double what other nations are charged." Except it should say, Trump threatens a 35% tariff on Canadian goods, and he may double what we have to pay. And they didn't write that because we have to pay these, and I'm going to keep saying that. We have to keep paying them. Is it a good thing that we're paying them? Probably, so we can plug in the fiscal black hole, but we have to pay them. Don't think about so you can't forget about that. And we will pay higher prices because of it, not other countries. And if other countries, if they apply tariffs back, then yeah, they're going to have to pay too, but they're going to be paying to their own country, not ours. That's why when Trump proposed an external revenue service, that never made any sense, because other countries are not just giving their money to us. The media needs to be shouting from the rooftops, like I have been, that other countries are not being charged. That is us. We are being charged. And if you think that Democrats would be amplifying this everywhere on social media all across the country, but they aren't. And if they were, then we would be hearing about it. I follow politics nearly every day, and I have not heard about this. I have not seen posts from any major Democratic leader. I have not seen any speeches. I've not seen any rallies. There has been none of this. And you would think that a party that isn't crap at politics wouldn't suck this bad, and that's what they do. The Democrats, unfortunately, they suck at politics at the moment. They are just letting Trump do whatever he wants to do, and if they think they're just going to be able to walk in 2026, they're going to have another thought coming. Moving on. Actually, we're not moving on yet. Another example of tariff policy that has made no sense is countries that we export more to are actually being tariffed. So Australia, for example, has a trade surplus with the U.S., which you would think there would be no tariffs on goods that we would be importing from Australia because we're already exporting more than we're importing from them. But no, President Trump still applied 10% tariffs. And that has actually shrunk the trade surplus. It was about $17 billion last year, and now it's about $15 billion this year. And it just proves that it is a mess. And it includes that, and these tariffs have even include islands that nobody has or ever will live on, like the ones in the South Pacific. Like, I don't think anyone lives on the South Sandwich Islands, yet they were still tariffed. Alrighty, next update is the war in Ukraine. This is not too much about this, but we're probably going to know more about it next week, and I kind of want to hint at it now. And I talked about this a bit last episode, but President Trump hinted a change in direction, which I was saying was likely. I'm not Nostradamus, I promise, but I was kind of suggesting last week, that something was about to change, and I said this was likely because Putin's escalation of the war, he keeps pounding Ukraine with more and more missiles, and Trump said that he just made a deal to arm Ukraine via NATO. So NATO is supposed to be the middleman here for sending weapons to Ukraine rather than us doing it, which doesn't really make a lot of sense because we are a part of NATO. Why not we just send them ourselves? This could include offensive weaponry, according to the president, but not just air support, so I don't know. You guys know my position on this war. Biden did for 3 years. What he did not work, and just sending weapons is not working either. So we either need to go further and faster, or we need to give up on Ukraine and let these two guys fight it out. And I don't want Russia to win, believe me, and I have no sympathy for Russia, never have. But I also am what some would call an isolationist, and I think we have issues in our country, and that we should be focusing on that for a little while. We spent 80 years worrying about what's going on in other countries, and if you think about it, we're not in as strong a position as we were 80 years ago. So maybe we should focus on what's going on here for another 80 years. Then we can worry about what's going on somewhere else. A country focused on the world's ills just ignores the problems at home, and that is what I have said. That being said, we don't know anything else yet, and we're supposed to learn that soon because Trump answered a question stating he knew a maternity ward in Kharkiv, which is in eastern Ukraine, was hit a couple of days ago, and that Trump was aware of the attack, and he said, quote, "You'll be seeing some things happen." And said on Monday, a major statement was going to be made, which means I'll have to update you next week about what he said. I don't know because I'm recording this Sunday night, so I don't know, but we'll have to find out. And he said that he might change things going forward. I assume he will. This comes after Russia sent another 600 missiles into Ukraine. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm interested to see the change of direction here because he's been more pro Putin for so long, and now that seems to be changing. But I don't see him being all pro-Ukraine either. Maybe he's going to announce a new isolationist direction. That would be what I would support. Maybe not. But anyway, that is it for now. It was a shorter episode this week. Once again, I want to tease an upcoming project you'll be hearing more about in a couple of weeks. And once that is completed, I'll have some more time to focus on a little bit longer episodes. So once again, you'll be hearing from me in the next couple of weeks. For now, though, I will see you again on July 21st, which will actually be the 1 year anniversary of Biden dropping out. So we will have an episode on Monday, July 21st, because that is a Monday. So thank you for listening, as always, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.